So you've decided to start breeding pigs. Do you get a boar? Do you rent a boar? Do you use AI? How are you going to approach that? Boars are big and scary. They can be aggressive and mean. Maybe you got kids in the picture, and the last thing that you need is an unruly animal that's going to present a danger to your family or your customers or your neighbors. But AI is kind of complicated, and how do you want to handle that? Is that something that you can invest time and money and infrastructure to manage and to do correctly? Well, in this video, I want to break down for you the way I think about owning a boar. I will give you a spoiler alert right up front and tell you that I have chosen to use a boar rather than AI. I'm going to flesh that out a little bit, although there are absolutely pros and cons of both boars and using AI, artificial insemination, to be clear about what we're talking about there. I'm Stephen Riker, and this is Rowan Ridge Farm. We are in Western New Hampshire, where we are raising heritage hogs on pasture the old-fashioned way. And I'm sharing with you my journey in homesteading and farming, breeding pigs, which I've been doing for about 4 years, long enough to have some experience, but also long enough to have made quite a few mistakes. And I want to share them here with you guys in these videos so that we can make America farmers again and build the culture of food production for our own communities from the ground up, which I think is what we need as a nation. And this video is part of a series on breeding pigs, where we're doing deep dives into all of the various components and nuances, because when you start off breeding, there's a lot of questions that you don't even know to ask because you don't know what you don't know. And having been in a position to be asking and learning those questions myself, and as I'm always learning and asking those types of questions, I want to be able to share that with you guys. So I'm going to link the playlist for this video series in the description here. And if you subscribe to the channel, you'll be able to follow along with everything that we're doing, and you get notified when we make new videos, and we'll be able to stay in touch and keep this conversation going in that way. Should you have a boar? Boars are big and scary and dangerous, right? Not necessarily. Boars are not that much more dangerous than any other animal. On average, I would say my boars are gentler and less aggressive than the females on a day-to-day basis. Now, there certainly are exceptions when my boars are having a fight with each other, or if they are in the rut and they are romantically inclined, you're going to see some potentially dangerous activities there where they're going to be a lot more aggressive. But one of my biggest beliefs when it comes to breeding is that you have to come to terms with culling. Culling means removing animals from your herd when they exhibit characteristics that are non-negotiably unacceptable. And having an animal with a bad temperament is a guaranteed ticket to freezer camp, especially with boars. I have 2 boars at this point, and my boars reside with each other. And they reside with the herd, or with most of the herd, for most of the year. I remove them along with some companion animals. So if there are any females that have already been bred, and I'm not trying to keep those sows open because they're already bred, then I move them together so they have some company and they can all hang out. My boars are gentle enough, and they're not difficult or mean to the females. They're not mean to each other even. The only time when I have had some issues with my boars being aggressive is towards each other when they have been separated for long periods of time, and I moved one boar into a different herd and he dominated that herd, and then he comes back to the old herd where he's no longer the dominant boar, and then the two fought. And it was kind of ugly and scary, but I stayed out of the middle of it, let them figure out the pecking order again, and everybody kind of went back to baseline, and there was no problem with it. They're kind of ripped it in half, and from what I can tell, no other injuries other than just injuries to the pride. And they've been together since they were pretty little, so under normal circumstances they don't fight. But Pignatius escaped from his barn area and went down across where with the feeders and decided to hang out with them for a week. And in his absence, Charlie decided that he would assert authority over the barnyard. And when Pignatius came back to inspect his territory,
He had to assert himself and his dominance. And
a lot of people are afraid of keeping boars because they're afraid that having a boar is going to lead to some sort of problem or danger on their farm. And there's a couple of risks with having a boar where, number one, I would say you can mitigate the temperament issue by owning a boar from the time that it's a piglet. Don't buy a boar when it's an adult and it's had all of the bad habits or question marks about how it was trained and raised already baked into the cake. Buy it from the time that it's little, and then you can be there with it as it grows up, where it learns to trust you, learns to respect you, and learns to appreciate your role in its life and see you as a positive influence, not as a competitive influence where it's going to act aggressively towards you. All of my boars that I have raised from a very young age, with the exception of one, and he is now a thing of the past, because he's been removed. All my boars have been very good, and I've had them all from the time that they were little. And the same thing goes with bringing boars into an existing herd where you have an adult boar, and then you want to bring in a new boar. Don't bring an adult boar into a herd that has an adult boar, because then there's going to be an immediate competition. If you have an adult boar and you bring in a little piglet who's a boar, it's really clear who's in charge. And so the little boar is going to grow up with the understanding that, okay, this is my daddy and I'm not going to mess with him, and what he says goes. And then as he gets older and bigger, they'll start to fuss and tussle a little bit, but they will establish a pecking order because the dominant boar is going to understand that the little one is a little one, that he's not really a threat to him, and he will generally be okay with him. And that's how I've fared having two boars in my herd. I'm bringing in a new little boar, a purebred Berkshire. He's just a tiny little guy, but I'm running him in, and I'm going to swap out my old spot boar, send him down the road where he can do some breeding still. He's young enough, he's got enough good years left in him, but I want to bring in some different genetics to kind of change things up. Having a boar is not something that I think you should be afraid of because of the inherent risks or fears of any kind of aggression from the males. And again, if you do everything right and you raise them from a young age and they are still aggressive, the answer is sausage. And then you start over. And that's one of the reasons why having two boars is beneficial, because as long as you have one that's guaranteed to be working, if you try to bring in another one and he doesn't work out, well, you still have an option there for your breeding. One of the other reasons why I strongly recommend people getting adult boars that are already grown up is because the way a lot of farmers treat their boars is with a very antagonistic approach. They pen the boars by themselves and they just use bigger, stouter fences to control them and keep them in. And they go barn sour when they are kept by themselves, a lot of times without any company, or when there's a antagonistic relationship developed there that goes on. And then you buy this animal and it's an adult and it has all of these ingredients already baked into the cake, and you bring it onto your farm. And then now you have a boar that's going to be more aggressive, and it's going to be a problem, and it's going to be a risk. But if you're raising them from a small age, you're the one in control and you can set the terms of those relationships. And it's unfortunate in my area here in New England, every year I see a handful of people that bought a boar because they thought they wanted to get into breeding. They didn't watch this playlist and really understand the nuances of what can happen when you're breeding. And so they just want to get that animal off of their feed bill because they had enough piglets. Maybe they're done, they're going to get out of it. And then they just dump their boar on the market. The animal hasn't been treated super well, and it's going to be bought by somebody who just needs a boar to make some babies, and then they're going to try to get rid of them. They're not treated with any value, and they're treated as a very transient, transactional, like, do your breeding and get out of here. There's no care for them. They're not being treated with a long-term view of their function on the farm. And I think that's one of the big benefits of having a boar, is that when you raise them from the time that they're little, you are kind of stuck with them. These are the genetics that you're going to be working with for a few years, because it's going to take you about 6 months until he even starts breeding, and then another 4 months until those first litters come through. And then if you do that for a couple of years till they're fully grown and they're an adult, then you've got a couple years into them. And so it makes you think a little bit more specifically about what you want to do with the animal and work a little harder to build something around your herd, so there is a centerpiece for your herd where you really invest good money in the genetics for a good quality boar, because you're going to bring him sows that are going to enable him to contribute his genetic piece to all of the puzzles, and you're going to see how you can make those pieces fit to improve the breed and the pigs that you are going to be making, whether they're purebreds or crosses. Now, to contrast this view of a long-term boar versus a short-term option-rich view of dealing with AI. One of the things that a lot of proponents of AI are going to go for is the fact that, well, I can choose this breed for this breeding, and I can choose a completely different boar for another breeding. I can order something from over here, something from over there, and I'm not stuck with one type of animal. And there's very true benefits to that, because you can make much faster progressions in some ways if you can try a lot of different things very quickly. You can order semen from a lot of different animals, and you can try different breedings all in one shot, and you don't have to be feeding a single boar. Artificial insemination requires you to do a lot more management of the animals, in that you have to be really paying attention for when they start going into heat and when they are in standing heat, when they're actively ready for implantation and insemination. And then you have to make sure that they are penned or corralled in such a way. And when a female pig is in heat, she may not always be the most cooperative. So you may need like a farrowing crate or an AI crate. I'm not sure the exact nomenclature. I don't have these things. I do know some people who do AI, and they do it without this infrastructure. They just kind of do it on the fly. They kind of sit facing the pig's ass on the ass. They hold the tail up with one hand and put it in, and then it's a done deal. And so for some people, it's very easy. And my point is not to try to discourage you from using AI. It's just to understand that these are some of the things that kept me away from it, because I work a full-time job off of the farm. I have 5 kids. I would have far fewer piglets if I didn't have a boar who was able to do the work overnight and while I'm at work and while I'm driving. Having a boar in the mix means that when the girls are ready, he's going to be the first one to know. They'll take care of business. And for me, that's a bigger benefit. I do like the idea of being able to have a lot of variability, but you're not really being pushed to explore and develop one line of genetics that you get from one boar further with AI as you would be with having an actual boar. And one of the things that is somewhat of an issue to me, and you guys can let me know in the comments if I'm full of it or if you think this is reasonable, but I kind of feel like using AI, it's like Tinder for dating, instead of actually going and meeting somebody and asking them out in real life and developing a relationship. It's this, you get a lot of optionality really quick, and you can short circuit the process a lot, which seems good in one hand, but on the other hand, you miss out on a lot of the quality and the longevity that comes with that. Because when I'm breeding and making secondary and tertiary crosses and all this other stuff with my different animals, I always have a detailed knowledge of the ancestry of those further generational, those younger animals that are being bred, inbred, rebred, crossbred, etc., because I know in great depth all of the characteristics of these animals. It's not, I saw a picture of this animal in the magazine. Did you see the hams on that pig? Great, let's get some of that semen, and then we put it in and hope that it's good. But I can spend a lot of time observing and maintaining and verifying all of the qualities, not just like one or two phenotypic qualities or physical characteristics of that animal and then breeding accordingly. But I'm really having to exhaust the genetic possibilities from one genetic line and really getting the most out of it. So you can look at some of those as pros and cons. Again, full disclosure, I've never done AI. The thing that's kept me away from AI is the storage of the semen, the time and record keeping and physical presence that is necessary for the farmer to verify and to make sure that the breeding happens. And on the flip side, that physical breeding and record keeping and involvement can be a good thing, because you have much more precise control and knowledge over, this is when the animal was bred. I know because I did it, and then I can make sure that I'm not going to be surprised by any piglets. Whereas with the boar, sometimes it's like, oh shoot, I guess he must have gotten her. I didn't realize that she was even in heat because I didn't notice that when I was down feeding after work. It just kind of happened. So again, you can look at this from both ways. A good quality boar is going to be the foundation of your herd. My big boar Pignacious. He is a 700, probably 800-ish pound purebred Tamworth, and he is super sweet, super friendly. He's good with the girls. He's good with the other boars that are around him. And I trust I trust him around my wife and the kids, and I have no regrets about owning a boar. The biggest thing when buying a boar, buy from a breeder that you trust, where you can go to this breeder and make sure that this breeder is the type of breeder either watches these types of videos or knows this information and is having these kind of conversations themselves, and that you can look at the preceding generations and really get an in-depth view of what you're buying into when you bring this animal home. Make sure that this animal has been raised or is bred into a management system that parallels what you are going to do. You don't want to go to a industrial hog barn and then buy an animal that you're going to bring up to New England and put on pasture out in the field without any climate control or medical management, because it's kind of going from one genre of living into a completely different one. Whereas my boar, Pignacious, I bought him from a pasture-based system in New York State. He had previous generations that had come from Kentucky and then England before that. There's good genetic knowledge, able to see what the parents looked like and what their quality was, and kind of how he had carried that breeding generationally forward, and understanding that he had been bred to be successful in a management system that was going to mimic what I was doing here in New Hampshire. And he has been nothing less than a great success. And I've been super happy to have him. And the same thing goes with my old spot boar. I love him. And I have the same confidence in my Berkshire boars. You got to work with a breeder that you trust and make sure that you know what is baked into the cake before you get it, and then put the time and effort into really squeezing every last little bit of juice, no pun intended, out of those boars to make sure that you are able to maximize their full potential and the genetic quality that they are able to bring into the operation, that it will be worthwhile. And you have an animal that's going to give you consistency, because you have that same animal who's going to be consistently producing and producing. And then when they get to a point where they're older and they're aging out, or maybe they're getting too big, you can line breed, which is father-daughter, father-granddaughter, mother-son. It's incestuous on a human basis, but for pigs, normal to concentrate those genetics, inbreeding them into a line so that you have those genes concentrated in a further generation of that animal, not to make it bigger or faster growing, because those faster growing breedings are going to be from outcrossings, not inbreedings. But you're going to be able to pass those genetics along and know what's baked into the cake, so that you can keep that lineage going, and that you can even sell to other people, because you have longevity and consistency. And that's a big benefit in what we're trying to do. It's not just about how to get the bigger, faster pig and one and done. It's about developing something and improving the breed altogether. And you kind of have to, in my opinion, to really buy into that and commit fully, you have to own that boar and keep them around to really be able to fully do that. And again, that's my opinion. That's a matter of style. I welcome your comments if you disagree and you have different experience. Hey, I'm open to hearing it, because there's a lot I haven't experienced, but this is just based on what I have seen and what I've done in my little corner of New England. Our goal here is to make America farmers again, and to build a culture around longevity of food supply chain, and to be part of that, and to have a long-term heritage. And we breed heritage hogs. We want to have a long-term vision for the animals that we are bringing into our program, not just, I want to breed a couple of piglets and then get the hell out with the least amount of risk. We're not talking about Tinder dating. We're talking about marriage, where we're saying we bring in the good genetics that are worth having, worth developing, and then we see it through over generations to build a heritage, not just with what we're doing in our farming as a social construct and as a business that we're passing down to our children and that we're using to feed our neighbors and our community with, but even in internally within the farm, the genetics that we're developing and that we're passing down, it's a matter of heritage where we're taking breeds that have been largely rejected by Smithfield pork and the other production models, but we're doing it on a small scale where the qualities within those breeds, they meet the needs that we have for survival on pasture and forage and in the woods. And then we're taking those and we're building them back, we're improving them, and we're carrying them on forward, not as a party trick because, oh, isn't that cool? But because we're actually making good pork and we're making good pigs better. That's what we're doing here. And I would love to have you subscribe to this channel. I would love to see you on the next video as well. So make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you guys in the next video.